Since assuming leadership in September 2022, Burkina Faso's captain Ibrahim Traore has generated a lot of activity. In addition to regaining land, launching anti-corruption initiatives, and promising swift action against terrorists, he has courted Russia, broken ties with France, and effectively handled the challenging shift to civilian rule. Despite all of this, people are still battling to make sure that Captain Ibrahim Traore is not leading the way in Burkina Faso. That is why in today's video, we are going to be briefing you on the most recent attack on Traore's life. We will also be talking more about his past attacks and why these attacks keep happening. The last thing we are going to share with you is the coup attempt in DR Congo. Reports of gunshots close to the presidency. Hundreds of protesters gathered in the country's capital on Friday to show support for Burkina Faso's military government. Protesters assembled at a roundabout in the heart of Ouagadougou and vowed to uphold President Ibrahim Traore's government. The protesters claimed that earlier in the afternoon, shots had been fired close to the presidential residence. They claimed they did not know what was going on, but they were there to stop anything from happening. Burkina Faso news agency AIB reported that an individual had tried to attack a guard at the palace, but there were no injuries or damage. However, security forces closed off access to the area around the palace. The landlocked West African nation has been governed by a military government since the elected President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore was overthrown by mutinying soldiers in 2022. On September 30, 2022, military leader Traore took over once more. He instituted a 21-month parliamentary assembly and transitional government, which would end on July 1. The next steps in the shift to civilian rule will be the subject of nationwide surveys on May 25th and 26th. Since 2015, Burkina's forces have been struggling to combat jihadist insurgencies that have terminated thousands of people and forced around 2 million from their homes, violence that the army's leaders used to justify their coups. Note that this is not the first time that there has been an attempt on Traore's regime. In January, it was reported that a murder attempt against Traore was thwarted in a stunning turn of events. It was reported that Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Santiago Damiba was the brains behind this foiled effort. Paul-Henri Santiago Damiba, born January 1981, is a Burkinabe military officer who served as interim president of Burkina Faso from January 31, 2022 to September 30, 2022, when he was removed in a coup by his military colleague Ibrahim Traore. Fortunately, the conspirators' plot to detonate an explosion inside the presidential home was thwarted in time. In the wake of the most recent attempt on his life, Burkina Faso has seen several moments of political instability. This precarious position was brought to light in September with the arrest of 4 military commanders on charges of plotting a coup. In a statement read out on television last year, the authorities said some arrests had been made and they were actively pursuing other suspects without giving specific details. Most people are now wondering if those plotting coups and fighting to remove Traore are dissatisfied with the job he is doing. What are their desires? Do they have something to offer the nation? Or are they merely seeking retribution? These individuals must advocate for themselves. The abortive attempt on Traore's life serves as a stark reminder of the enormous challenges he faces, both from internal and external adversaries. These people planning to take out Traore could not be working alone. They have people backing them. As the days go by, Traore keeps having more allies, and it will become very difficult for them to touch him. Bear in mind that Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger signed a mutual defense pact in September 2023, as the 3 Sahel countries aim to help each other against possible threats of armed rebellion or external aggression. So, how do these perpetrators think they will bypass these 3 countries? Anyone trying to remove Ibrahim Traore from where he is also has to remove the presidents of Niger and Mali. They will also have to deal with Vladimir Putin. The West could also be behind all that is going on because they want to find a new leader, one they will be able to manipulate. As we all know, Burkina Faso is rich. When it comes to natural resources, they have gold, zinc, copper, manganese, phosphate, and limestone in substantial quantities. It also has reserves of diamond bauxite, nickel, and vanadium. However, these remain largely unexplored. Since Traore has decided to stand up for the rights of his people and his country, some people want him gone. This will not be happening anytime soon, since the people of Burkina Faso are standing strong with what Traore is doing for them. They trust him. Ibrahim Traore has been keeping to his promise of transforming the country and ensuring a better life for his people. He has already launched and embarked on multiple developmental projects, as well as following up with projects that were launched before he rose to power. Some of these projects include the modernization of roads, the construction of Ouagadougou Airport, the starting up of multiple entrepreneurship programs, and many others. Some people argue that these attempts are coming as a result of the statement Traore made about elections. He had promised fair elections when he got into power, but later, he said elections were not a priority in the country at the moment. The question now is, are these people fighting for elections, or they are fighting for a safe country? This is the decade of coups in Africa. Of 492 attempted or successful coups carried out around the world since 1950, Africa has seen 220, the most of any region, with 109 of them successful. In the past 3 years, there has been a noticeable surge in coups across Africa, with military leaders seizing power in Gabon, Niger, Burkina Faso, Sudan, Guinea, Chad, and Mali. Out of 54 countries on the African continent, 4 to 5 have had at least one coup attempt since 1950. In January 2023, the Chadian government announced the arrest of 10 officers and a human rights activist. Baradine Berde Targuio, who was presented as the mastermind of an attempt to destabilize the constitutional order and institutions of the Republic. The 11 men were sentenced to 20 years in prison. They were convicted of undermining the constitutional order, illegal possession of weapons, and criminal association. The reason for the recurrent coup attempts in Africa is that the continent is still divided. Conflict and discord have always plagued Africa. To overcome these obstacles and create a more tranquil and cohesive continent, Africans must cooperate with one another. Programs for rapprochement, cultural exchange, and dialogue are a few ways to do this. Since so many African nations have suffered from autocratic governance and corruption, they have grown accustomed to it. By demanding transparency from their leaders, getting involved in politics, and holding them accountable, Africans can promote democracy and good governance. What Ibrahim Traore is doing in Burkina Faso is something these leaders ought to take note of. It's crucial to remember that African viewpoints on coups are dynamic. Expectations for governance are changing as a result of easier access to information and a greater understanding of democratic principles. This is seen in the increasing demands for inclusive and peaceful political processes, as well as accountability and openness. Some Africans, nevertheless, are certain that these takeovers will bring about change. As all this is going on, note that the Army of the Democratic Republic of Congo reported that on May 19, it repelled a coup attempt in Kinshasa, the country's capital, which involved both the U.S. and Congolese fighters. At least 3 people were terminated following the gunfight between armed men dressed in military uniforms and the bodyguards of a prominent politician. The House of Parliamentarian Vital Camera, who is expected to become Speaker, was attacked. Around 4 in the morning, gunfire was heard in Kinshasa, the capital, according to spokesman Sylvain Ekenge. He claimed that Malanga had been decisively neutralized during the assault and that about 50 people, including 3 Americans, had been detained and were currently being questioned by the specialized services of the armed forces. Captain Christian Malanga Muzumari, who is believed to have led Sunday's attack, was a wealthy businessman, politician, and one-time military captain in the Congolese army. He was a resident of the U.S. where his family secured political asylum when he was a child. In a post on X, the head of the UN stabilization mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Bintou Keita, vehemently denounced the incidents and pledged her support to the Congolese authorities. However, President Tshisekedi has not made any public comment on the situation concerning the coup yet. African Union Chair Moussa Faki said he strongly condemns the coup attempt and welcomed the response of the country's defense and security forces. The Democratic Republic of Congo has been engulfed in chaos for almost 30 years, with a multitude of persons and complex, deeply rooted factors contributing to its instability. Apart from M23, a number of other armed groups, Congolese nationals and foreign forces, are involved in the power struggle, mostly in the country's east. There are some of Kinshasa's neighbors involved as well. We cannot really say the recent gunshots in Ouagadougou was a coup attempt, but they all fall in line. These people involved are still trying to destabilize the Traore government. Although this decade of coups has left its mark, it may also be seen as a warning. Africa can create a future in which coups become a thing of the past and are replaced by a prosperous and democratic continent by tackling the root causes and accepting real reforms. Recall that Africa's destiny is uncertain. The decisions Africans make in the present shape it. Let Africans choose unity over separation, action over inaction, and hope over despair. Then, and only then, will the African continent be able to genuinely create a continent that promises a better future for everybody, and where coups are a thing of the past. However, what do you think should be done to people who are involved in attacks on the presidency or coup attempts?